muscles are on fire from this run. I wonder how that is, how they're on fire, how they move. Do you know?
What a great question. Now, we all know muscles contract and relax to create movement, but how exactly does this happen? Something called the sliding filament theory is responsible for muscles contracting, and therefore motion as these contracting muscles pull on and release bones. If we look at a muscle, there is a lot going on here. It's made up of many smaller bundles known as fascicles. Fascicles are sacs containing many muscle fibers all grouped together. Muscle fibers are just muscle cells, and cells are the smallest unit that can operate on their own in this system. There are, however, smaller organelles, known as myofibrils, that make up these muscle cells. Myofibrils run parallel to each other along the long axis of a muscle cell and contain the most important contractile protein fibers that are in charge of contracting and creating motion. Even though each movement in your arm or leg might feel fast and all at once, each movement is actually the result of thousands of little contractions of these small protein fibers that make up the myofibrils, actin and myosin. So what goes down is essentially, on a very small scale, a neuron. Neurons are nerve cells that send messengers to and from the brain to control parts of the body. Sends acetylcholine, a kind of neurotransmitter or chemical messenger, into the gap between the neuron and the muscle cell. The orange area here is the muscle cell, and the little white dots are acetylcholine. So then acetylcholine binds into receptors on the muscle cell and signals for sodium ions to be pumped into the cell. Sodium ions then depolarize the cell membrane, which has to do with the electrochemical gradient naturally found within a cell, and yada yada. This depolarization forms an action potential, or this positive electric signal that travels all through the membrane. Eventually, the action potential signals another ion to be released. This time, it's calcium. Okay, now come over to this zoomed-in model of the myofilaments, myosin, actin, and tropomyosin. Tropomyosin doesn't play as big of a role, but it does cover the actin. When calcium floods, each calcium ion is able to bind to tropomyosin, shifting this myofilament so that it was covering actin and now it's not, so that actin's binding sites are available for myosin to bind to it. In ATP, a molecule that contains energy, attaches to the myosin, where it is then broken down into ADP and phosphate. And as energy is released from this reaction, the myosin binds to actin, simultaneously pulling it like a rope. This pulling motion is what's known as the sliding filament theory. Essentially, these two proteins are sliding past each other. The myosin repeatedly binds and unbinds to the actin, pulling it. As it pulls the actin, the myofilament actin gets smaller, contracting.
Wow, thank you so much. That's good to know.